Hello and welcome to Avalara's webinar on European e-invoicing updates. What's new? What's next? I'm Alex Bulff, Senior Director for Global Indirect Tax. On today's webinar, we're going to start by looking at the timeline for global e-invoicing mandates. We're then going to have a quick overview of different updates from across Europe, looking at individual countries. We're going to start with Italy, France, Spain, Poland, Romania. We're then going to look at Serbia, Portugal, Slovakia, Luxembourg, and Belgium. And then finally, we're going to look at the future of e-invoicing, so the direction of travel and key trends. And finally, how to prepare for e-invoicing and all of these future mandates. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by my Avalara colleagues and guest stars today. We have Renata Organek from Poland, Cyril Bray from France, Mario Busi from Italy, and Nicole Lopez Real, who's based in Seattle in the US, but is our guest speaker on Spain today. So very quickly, just a bit of background about Avalara. We are a global tax technology company. We are headquartered in the US out of Seattle, but with our European headquarters in Brighton in the UK. But we have a very large European presence, which seems to grow almost every week, with offices in France, Germany, Belgium, Poland, Spain, Luxembourg, Romania, Turkey. And we actually have content and products that support VAT, GST, sales tax in over 193 countries. And in terms of our products, we support the entire indirect tax lifecycle, from registrations, obtaining VAT, GST, and sales tax, registration numbers across the globe in 77 different countries. We can support with classification of products for VAT and customs duty. We can help with determination, so calculating the right rate of indirect tax. We can support with invoicing, so e-invoicing across different mandates from B2B, B2C, B2G, as well as real-time reporting and other digital reporting. And finally, we have solutions to help with the preparation and filing of indirect tax returns. That's through our SaaS VAT reporting solution or a managed VAT reporting service. I wanted to start by looking at the timeline for the introduction of e-invoicing mandates across the globe. If you look at the left-hand column here, over the last decade, the majority of e-invoicing mandates have been in Latin America and South America. So starting with Brazil, over a decade ago, e-invoicing has spread across the region. And most of the e-invoicing legislation across Europe has been limited to public procurement, so business to government supplies. And really, the only country to mandate e-invoicing for business to business invoicing has been Italy. This year, we've seen a lot of changes, particularly in Portugal, changes to Italy, to the existing e-invoicing mandate, as well as countries launching their own e-invoicing platforms, initially for business to government supplies, but then looking to scale those for all business to business supplies. Next year, there are a number of countries introducing e-invoicing, and we're going to cover some of these today. But the big game-changing year to look out for is 2024. That's the year where France and Spain will both mandate e-invoicing for all businesses in the country. So, that is roughly 4 million businesses in each country that will need to be in a position to not only issue e-invoices, but be able to receive them. In 2024, we'll also see Poland launch its KSEF e-invoicing mandate. And there are another number of other countries across Central and Eastern Europe who are likely to launch e-invoicing that same year. And then looking beyond 2024, my prediction is, virtually every country in Europe will mandate e-invoicing, and we may see that accelerated through reform at a European Commission level. In November, we will see the EU's VAT in the digital age reform kick off through a draft directive setting the vision for digital reporting requirements across the EU. We're now going to look at Italy, and I'm pleased to be joined by Mario Busi. So I thought we could start, Mario, with you providing a very brief overview of the e-invoicing mandate in Italy as it stands today.
Hello, Alex. Hello, Holt. Thank you. Just wanted to make a quick recap about Italy mandate for e-invoicing. We started in March 2015 with B2G mandate. So every invoices to public administration was to be issued with the SDI system, through the SDI system in invoicing format. After that, in January 2019, the e-invoicing was extended to all B2B and B2G and B2C transactions. Of course, for B2C, where a mandate is specific requirements. And from 2022, we had some new changes in cross-border reports and for micro enterprises which have to issue electronic invoices too.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm just going to dive in with a quick update in Italy here. So Italy's always had very strict legislation in terms of e-invoicing data archiving.
Yeah.
That's changed actually in the last year. So in January, there was new rules, regulations issued by the Agency for Digital Italy.
Yes.
As a recap, in Italy, the data needs to be archived for at least 10 years from the date of the last record. So that's quite a long period of time. You need to appoint a conservation manager and a conservation manual. Mario, I'll let you say the names of these in Italian because I will not get them right.
Responsabile della conservazione, quello che noi chiamiamo, what we usually call conservazione digitale. Then a company must send to a provider or must archive legally documents for 10 years. And now, as you said before, a company must appoint a conservation manager, responsabile della conservazione, who produce a conservation manual, manuale della conservazione. Of course, this is not the business of the companies, so that the provider for archiving, now they found kind of a turnaround about that, and they provide the manual as if the companies, the customer, produced that.
Thanks, Mario. And I suppose that is one of the big changes because, strictly speaking, from January 2022, the drafting of that manual can officially not be delegated to a third party. It is supposed to be drafted internally by the conservation manager. So, that is quite a big change for businesses. And, now is probably the time to review your processes, the documentation you have on file to document your archiving procedure end to end.
Yeah, that's definitely, you have to move to a different organization of your company. And that requires, of course, efforts and capacity and people doing this job.
Thanks, Mario. So another recent change from July this year, July 2022, has been around the reporting of cross-border invoices via SDI. So historically, invoices to or from foreign businesses have been reported to the Italian tax authority on a quarterly basis via the Estremetro report. But from July this year, that report disappears, and the data from those invoices needs to be reported via the SDI. Mario, I just wanted to get a bit of clarity on this because there seems to be some confusion, particularly in Italy. I've had our customers in the UK, reach out and say, look, we have customers in Italy, they say from July this year, the UK business needs to raise an e-invoice to the Italian customer. That's not right, is it?
Yeah, that's not right. Thank you for the question. Yeah, there's kind of a misunderstanding about these reports because the foreign suppliers for an Italian customer, they don't have to send any, let's say, legally electronic invoices. They can just send a PDF or an EDI invoice to Italian customer, and all the operation regarding the report to the tax authority is in charge to the Italian customer at this time, so that you have to send an autofattura in inbound, of course, for inbound invoices, to the tax portal, just to report this transaction. And this is to be done each invoice they receive from abroad. Vice versa, on outbound invoices, the Italian provider for any customer has to send a PDF or another format invoice to the final customer abroad, but must issue an invoice to the SDI that remains to the SDI because there's no connection with the foreign customers.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mario. So, again, that's the responsibility of the Italian business, not a foreign supplier or a foreign customer. Just to make that point clear. Those sales invoices, the data needs to be reported within 12 days of the time of supply, and for purchase invoices by the 15th of the month following the time of supply. The format of the data needs to be in the mandated XML format, so the Fattura PA standard. This is quite a big change. It's the kind of evolution of the Italian e-invoicing system, as Mario said, started off business to government, then moved to business and business to consumer, and now we're moving to the next step around e-reporting. So e-reporting the data for cross-border invoices, and I think this is going to be a trend. We're going to see not only in Italy but across Europe and beyond. So there's been a couple of other recent updates in Italy in relation to e-invoicing. Mario, can you quickly talk about the updates on e-invoicing between Italy and San Marino?
Yes, the tax authorities of Italy and San Marino reached an agreement, and from July this year, e-invoicing for transfer of goods can be exchanged via SDI and the tax authority portal of San Marino. The rest of the transaction for services has to be managed as a forma restaurata, so that the report to the tax authority from Italian company to the SDI, like an autofattura or a foreign country invoice.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mario. So, if you are supplying goods between Italy and San Marino, vice versa, do consider the impact and whether you need to raise the invoices via SDI for that. And then finally, in Italy, part of the progression of the invoicing system, we're now seeing the extension of the scope of e-invoicing to very small businesses.
Yeah, micro business was excluded from the SDI invoicing system, but since July they have to raise an invoice to the SDI, as well as the other companies.
That's great. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you.
Right, moving on to France now. I'm pleased to be joined by Cyril Bray. Hi, Cyril.
Hey, Alex. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So, Cyril, I know we talk about this every single day, but just as a recap, France is introducing mandatory B2B invoicing for French businesses. So this applies for domestic transactions from July 2024. This will cover the issuing, transmission, receipt of e-invoices on a B2B basis. There'll be a mandated format. And then French businesses will have a choice, won't they, in terms of what platforms they use to issue and receive e-invoices. Can you give a quick overview of those options?
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, in fact, businesses in France will have a choice between, let's say, a private platform, which should be accredited by the French tax authority, which is called in French PDP. So it's in fact the platform which is partner of dematerializations. Or if they don't want to pay a third party, they can use from a free use the French national portal that we call in fact the PPF, which is in fact in French the Portail Public de la Facturation. So the two options are, let's say, quite different. I will say that there is also uncommon from tax authorities. The PPF, it's more for smallest businesses. So for the one who don't have a complex, let's say, invoicing process with not real complexity in the format of the facturations, they will send. For the largest or medium-sized company, it's clearly recommended to use one of the partners, which should be accredited during the next, let's say, 18 months in France. So yeah, that's clearly the two options that are available in France at the moment.
Thanks, Cyril. In a minute, we're going to look at the latest decree and order in relation to e-invoicing and what this means for the PPF and the PDPs. So, Cyril, I just said, this is a domestic scope for e-invoicing. It's just for B2B. But France is also introducing e-reporting.
Yeah, correct, Alex. In fact, on top of adding a mandatory mandate for B2B invoicing, it's also a mandatory e-reporting obligations for cross-borders and for domestics B2C sales. So in fact, with the, let's say, combinations of the two mandates, e-invoicing, e-reporting, the goals that French authority wants to achieve is that clearly pre-populate the French monthly VAT returns. So in short term, they want to pre-populate everything on your VAT returns. Then companies just have to double check that figures pre-populate are aligned with their transaction realized in France.
Fantastic, thank you. So France is introducing mandatory invoicing in a phased approach. But large companies, they have to issue invoices from July the 1st, 2024. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, will have an additional 6 months, so from January 1st, 2025. And then the very smallest businesses in France will then have an additional year before they have to mandatory issue e-invoices. But Cyril, I think the headline is often about the sending, but actually from that first date, July the 1st, 2024, absolutely all companies and businesses in France will need to be in a position to receive the invoices.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, in fact, when you have a look at the size of your company, it's also important to have this, let's say, really key information in mind. That's from July 1st, 2024, you should be able to accept, receive any invoicing, but also you should be also able to differently between your size of your company. For example, for a large company, as per July 1st, it's also the obligation to create and submit the e-reporting file. So it's invoicing and e-reporting. E-reporting, it's clearly following the same calendars as the e-reporting implementation by phase in France.
So how will these different e-invoicing platforms be used to send and receive invoices? Well, the big change to AP and AR processes in France will be that French businesses will no longer be able to send invoices direct to customers. There's no longer an option now to send an invoice in paper, a standard PDF attached to an email. Instead, the PDP partner platform or the public invoicing portal and the PPF will send the invoice to the customer's platform. The choice of the platform to receive the invoice from suppliers, from vendors, is a commercial choice and a decision of the business. And as Cyril said, the French government recently announced that the PPF, the main government platform, will only have basic core functionality, and that it's likely only to be used by the very smallest companies in France. So Cyril, in France, there is going to be some choice here in terms of acceptable formats, so some degree of flexibility. But my understanding is that all of the partner platforms will need to offer the agreed common formats, and that will allow to achieve interoperability. So, regardless if the supplier and their customer are using different operators, they can still issue, receive, and interpret different invoice formats.
No, for sure. Yeah, you're right. In fact, the real interest also of using a PDP instead of only the PPF will clearly the possibility to have more than the 3 basic formats which are acceptable only by the PPF. So for the moment, the PPF only accept UBL, CTU, and FactoryX formats, which are clearly the 3 main formats that should be acceptable from PPF. But if you want to use another format like Edifact or PayPal or other one, you can use also potentially a PDP. So the PDP can continue to maintain your actual formats you want to use, and then only submit to the PPF the mandatory information that tax authority is clearly requiring.
Fantastic, thanks, Cyril. And looking at those formats, UBLs, CII, FactorX, those are compatible with the European e-invoicing standard EN 16931. You'll hear this a lot. It's going to be central, I believe, to the European e-invoicing reform that the European Commission is going to announce next month. And then finally in France, just in the last few weeks, we've had the publication of a new decree and an associated order on e-invoicing, confirming a lot of the technical requirements and specifications and the roles and responsibilities of PDPs that we'd already understood, through guidance, through FAQs. But the interesting thing about, this latest legislation really confirms new invoice content requirements as well. So it's not just going to be a change in the format of an invoice in France and how that's issued and received, but also there's 3 new mandatory invoice content requirements. Cyril, can you just provide a quick overview of what those 3 are?
No, sure. Yeah, in fact, the official decree was clearly one, let's say, step which was missing. And now I think we got the full, let's say, content from a legislative point of view. So we can start working on the technical spec and just see what should be the next one. So regarding the new invoice content requirement for France, so the decrees clearly introduced 3 main ones. First one should be the delivery address for goods, where different from the customer address on the invoice. So that's typically used in the retail sectors, when you have, for example, a delivery of goods in another place that's your made headquarters or register address. Second one, which is more really interesting, and that's the key informations to be used also with what we call the directory, called in French annuaire. It's the add of CRN number on the invoice. So CRN number in France, it's a 9-digit numbers attribute to each companies when you create your companies or when you register your company in France for that purposes. So the CRN number should clearly be the pivot. So each company should be registered on the French directory with their CRN numbers. And adding on top of the CRN number, you will have also, if you use a specific PDP or if you use a PF. So in fact, with these informations, your customer or your providers may know from which, let's say, process you want to use for invoicing and your reporting. And the last one, it's a narrative, what we call option for payment of tax on basis of debits, which in fact is the collection of VAT based on cash. So in French, it's called option pour la TVA sur les débits. And these options, it's clearly a new mention to add on the invoice. previously, these options was already present in most invoices in France, because in fact, it permits to your buyer to know that your sellers of the options, so the buyer can deduce the VAT directly when he saw the options.
Thanks, Cyril. I think that's really interesting, and there's obviously a master data issue there for suppliers and customers. Getting that serial number, in the ERP and in the master data. That idea that number, an identifier, drives the ability to send the invoice to the right customer and their platform. That's going to be a common theme for e-invoicing. They typically work on dynamic discovery driven by unique identifying number, a company number, a VAT number, depending on the country. So that's certainly part of the change management process businesses should start to look at. Very quickly, I don't want to go through the PDP requirements in too much detail. Avalara, other providers are currently working through this. Working with the working group and the French tax authorities to understand the requirements, meet them, and then become accredited. But what I would say is, it is quite an onerous process to be a PDP. So not every provider, will become certified, because there are going to be limitations in terms of certifications, audits, meeting local French cybersecurity requirements. So do look at the progress of PDPs and look out for the certification process. Thanks, Cyril. Great job.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks all.
Right, we're now going to look at Spain. I'm really pleased to be joined by Nicole Lopez Real. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, everyone.
So Spain currently has e-invoicing on a voluntary basis for B2B. There is a different version of the government e-invoicing platform that business-to-business supply is often used for subcontracting within public procurement. But Spain has announced it's moving to mandatory e-invoicing from 2024. And, this came from a big growth law, a law that was has been passing through the various legal processes to try and, boost efficiencies, digitalize the economy. And just in recent weeks, we've seen the Spanish Gazette officially publish this law. And this law mandates that companies and professionals in Spain issue and receive e-invoices from 2024. This is going to have a phased approach. And, we are awaiting the full technical requirements of this new e-invoicing mandate. But in parallel, there's also legislation going through the process, looking at the requirements that invoicing and systems need to meet, which is going to have the same timeline. So talking about timeline, Nicole, when is this expected to kick in for large businesses?
Thank you, Alex. So as Alex mentioned, on September 29th, the Spanish government published in the Spanish official gazette what is called as the Ley Crea Encrete. This law includes a section that requires companies to issue electronic invoices for their B2B transactions. And the Spanish government has 6 months to approve this regulation. That is until March 29, 2023. Once the regulation is approved, companies with over 8 million euros of revenue will need to start issuing electronic invoices 1 year after the date that this is approved. And the expectation that we have is that this will likely happen as of January 1st, 2024. Also, companies with under $8 million euros of revenue will have 2 years after the approval to start issuing electronic invoices for their B2B transactions. For example, if the regulation is approved on January 1st, 2023, these companies with under 8 million euros of revenue will need to start issuing invoices on January 1st, 2025. And then, as Alex mentioned as well, in parallel to this regulation, on February 21st this year, the government also published a draft royal decree which outlined the software and electronic invoicing requirements. And this is pending approval and publication in the official Gazette, but the mentioned date in the draft is to be applicable as of January 1st, 2024.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nicole. So the key date there is likely to be 1st of January 2024. So 6 months ahead of the French mandate. But certainly watch the space. Let's wait for the final approval, but also the real detail in terms of the technical specifications. As Nicole said, we are waiting for various draft software and invoice requirement legislation to be passed and published. But looking at the draft specifications, there's going to be a lot more formality to be an invoice provider in Spain in terms of functionality and the technical specifications to be met. So, looking at a few highlights of these draft requirements, systems must be able to generate a registration billing record at the time of or immediately prior to the issuing of an invoice. Billing records need to have a fingerprint or hash added to them. And invoices will have an alphanumeric identification code and also include a QR code. And that QR code will again need to meet its own technical and functional specifications. Where the system is able to send all the invoices to the Spanish tax authority, the AEAT, there'll be a very specific narrative added to that invoice, the very factu. It appears at the moment that digital signatures will be required, but they won't be mandatory where the invoicing system sends all of those billing records to the Spanish tax authorities. So lots of changes there. Nicole, I suppose, we watch the space, we wait for further guidance, we wait for the technical specifications, but, not long to prepare really, for mandatory invoicing.
That's right.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you, everyone.
We're now going to look at Poland, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Renata Bogdanak.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Renata. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. So Poland has recently launched a new national system of e-invoices. This is KSEF. Renata, can you give the full name in Polish?
Yeah, it's Krajowy System e-Faktur, we may say it is National e-Invoicing System.
Fantastic, thank you. So this system will allow Polish taxpayers, so businesses resident in Poland, to issue and receive structured e-invoices. At the moment, it's voluntary, so Polish businesses have been able to use the KSEF platform from this year, 2022. And even where they opt to use it, it can still be used in parallel with paper invoices and non-structured e-invoices. But we've recently had confirmation from the European Commission that they have approved in the form of a derogation from the main invoicing directive and VAT directive that Poland can mandate B2B e-invoicing from January the 1st, 2024. So under KSEF, there'll be structured invoices, and it's an XML format. And this will follow a logical structure schema, the FA VAT. A version of this structure has been released now by the Ministry of Finance. You can find this online at their website. There is an anticipation that e-invoicing will eventually replace the SAFT in Poland. So this is, of course, an existing monthly digital reporting requirement. Renata, will this replace JPK immediately? What's the plan?
I don't think so that it will very soon, just because right now we have SAFT5, which covers two parts, evidence part and declaration part. So e-invoicing system will cover the evidence part, but some decisions might be made only by the taxpayer, what means that the second part will still be required. So I don't think so that it will be very soon, but for sure it is something what the tax authorities in Poland are very interested. So later or sooner, the e-invoicing system will affect at least the scope of monthly reporting, and maybe in the future it will just replace it.
Very interesting. So, businesses still need to meet that JPK requirement, even as they move to KSEF.
Yeah.
And of course, until the 1st of January 2024, if Polish businesses adopt KSEF earlier, because there's no mandate in place, the supplier and customer will have to agree together to issue and receive e-invoices. And I believe, Renata, there are some benefits the tax authority have offered for early adopters.
Yeah, the tax authorities try to encourage the entities to apply the system even right now in this year. So I think that the biggest benefit is just the possibility of obtaining VAT refunds in 40 days instead of 60. But remember that to apply this simplification, the entity must issue all invoices within this system. Every single invoice must be there. Okay,
interesting. So there isn't a incentive there, but it does require full adoption of KSEF and the full move to structured e-invoices using the system. Renata, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
So Romania has also launched its own e-invoicing national system, the e-factura system, or RO e-factura. And again, this is designed for businesses to issue and receive e-invoices. This system is initially mandatory for public procurement, so business to government supplies, and that's been in place since July 1st this year, 2022. Romania also mandated this for B2B use, but in very limited circumstances. So for suppliers of high fiscal risk goods, until it receives a derogation from the European Commission, it can't be mandatory for all businesses. There is some speculation that this could become mandatory next year in 2023. But of course, because we're still waiting for this derogation from the European Commission, that timeline, won't be confirmed till then. My view is this is more likely to be 2024, joining Poland, Spain, and France. But with Romania, do watch out because it could be earlier. And the Romanian tax authority will issue an order 30 days following any derogation decision from the European Commission. So once the European Commission provide confirmation that the Romanians can proceed with the invoicing and confirm the timeline, the Romanian tax authority will then move very quickly to move that forward and implement it in Romanian law. So under e-factura in Romania, again, invoices must meet a predefined XML format. So this is going to meet a Romanian invoice standard, the RO CIUS, which in turn actually meets the European invoicing standard, so the EN 16931 that we've mentioned before. Businesses will be able to connect to the system either via API, so their ERP or e-invoicing software via API direct to the system, or through an app that is being made available. A unique identification number will be assigned to the invoice by the system, and there will be validation checks on all e-invoices going through the e-factura system. So looking at the validation checks that will be carried out, it's been published that the following checks will be applied. So checks on the structure and syntax, checks on that are semantic and logical, checks on the authenticity of origin, so the identity of the invoice issuer, the integrity of the invoice content. And although no VAT checks will initially be applied in the first year, it's been it's been made very clear that these will be added. So I think this is important. I think these checks are probably indicative of typical checks that will be run across Europe on e-invoice data. But it really amplifies getting the invoice right first time. So in the right format, without any missing content, meeting the right standards, having the right digital signatures, but also getting the tax right first time. Under e-invoicing, that becomes critical. There is no second chance because the tax authorities will be able to validate the tax in real time, or if they're not doing that initially, they'll be able to validate it in bulk, once they have that data. We're now going to have a look quite quickly at some other European e-invoicing updates. So firstly, we're going to look at Serbia. So you will remember from the timeline at the start that Serbia is actually mandating B2B e-invoicing from January 1st, 2023. They have a system e-factura. This has been in place for B2G invoicing from May 1st, 2022, earlier this year. Serbia follows the UBL 2.1 standard, and you can actually access sample files today to download to test. Serbia has its own local specification for e-invoicing, but this is also identical to that European standard. Businesses will have to register first on the electronic identification portal, and they'll need a qualified electronic certificate or two-factor authentication to access this platform. Similar to Italy, invoices need to be archived for at least 10 years. And where a third party is used, they are known as information intermediary activities, and they need to be accredited by the Serbian authorities. There's been some updates in Portugal. So I just want to make it clear, there is no e-invoicing mandate for business to business in Portugal, just for public procurement. But actually, Portugal has some of the strictest requirements for invoicing. And with a lot of new legislation, these really apply to non-resident Portuguese VAT-registered businesses. So where a PDF or a non-EDI e-invoice is issued, they must have a qualified e-signature applied in order to receive the benefits, and that to be treated as any invoice under Portuguese law. We also have this new concept of a NAPCUD code. This is a unique document number, identifies tax invoices and confirms that they're valid. Portuguese invoices also need a QR code. So this applies to all invoices, electronic, paper invoices, tax invoices, tax receipts. And the invoicing software that is used in Portugal needs to be certified. It needs to be approved by the Portuguese tax authority. And even the certification number of that software needs to be printed on the invoice. And then finally, a digital reporting requirement in Portugal, the SAFT for invoices, or SAFT PT. This requirement currently applies to all Portuguese businesses. This is being extended to non-resident businesses who have a Portuguese VAT number from January 2023. The idea is that your certified invoicing software will give you the ability to submit the invoice data in a predefined SAFT format and submit that to the Portuguese tax authority. We're now going to quickly look at Slovakia. So Slovakia, again, is another country in the region that has launched its own national e-invoicing system. Primarily, this is being used for business to government supplies, but it's been made clear that the plan is to scale this to business use in the future. Again, a common trend that we're seeing across Europe. So similar to a lot of other countries, you'll be able to access this platform through an API. There's an open API web service, or ERPs, invoicing software will be able to connect to. non-resident businesses that are using this platform, can issue and receive invoices via a unique dedicated email address. When will this be made mandatory for B2G and B2B? Well, we don't actually know at the moment. It's recently been announced by the Slovakian government that government entities in the country will have access to the test environment of the system in April 2023. And then the mandates will follow. So the timing, not clear. We initially thought this would be introduced in 2022 for business to government, maybe being scaled to B2B use the following year. I think those timelines are now pushed forward. So again, this is a case of watch this space. And then the final countries to provide an update on in the Benelux region, Luxembourg and Belgium. So these are very much at the moment limited to business to government, so public procurement. And we've seen legislation passed in both countries mandating the use of e-invoicing within public procurement, meeting the European standard, so using PEPL or UBL. So in Luxembourg, this is a phased approach based on the size of the business, of the vendor. So large businesses starting in May this year, May 22, medium businesses in October 22, and then the final phase, small businesses in March 2023 next year. Belgium, similar time frame, but the actual phasing is based on contract value. So the value of the public procurement contract. And you'll see on the screen now those different phases and when they're introduced. The interesting thing about Belgium is, like a lot of other European countries have adopted PEPL, the B2G. It's being rumored, slated, anticipated that Belgium may be the first country to actually scale PEPL and use that for business to business mandatory invoicing. But again, at the moment, it's a case of watch this space. I'm now going to quickly look at the future of e-invoicing. Hopefully during this presentation, you're starting to see some similarities, some kind of key trends, themes that are emerging across Europe, when we start looking at the requirements in each country. So here are a few trends that I'm seeing, and I think will become the future of e-invoicing. Firstly, PEPL expansion. More countries will jump on this PEPL train. Most European countries use PEPL for public procurement. You can use it on a voluntary basis for B2B, but we will see PEPL being adopted much wider, further afield. A great example of this, looking outside of Europe, is in Asia Pacific. Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Japan have all set up PEPL authorities and are already launching PEPL e-invoicing. I've mentioned this before, VAT in the digital age, big initiative at a European Commission level. We have had consultations, we've had studies and reports. We're finally going to receive, recommendations. We're going to have a draft directive from the 16th of November. What will this have in relation to e-invoicing? Well, a big focus of this is around digital reporting requirements and how that can be harmonized, simplified within Europe. Of course, the detail will be in that final directive, but we expect this to remove a lot of the barriers for countries introducing e-invoicing. We think e-invoicing will be promoted. The European e-invoicing standard will also be promoted, and hopefully will be made in acceptable formats and standard across the board. And we will see a new pan-European digital reporting requirements, possibly through the use of mandatory e-invoicing. So really watch the space. We're going to see the increased use of QR codes. So already we've said Spain is looking to introduce this in 2024. Portugal has already, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has, Switzerland use QR codes, not for tax, but for payment details on the invoice. This is a trend, it's a theme. I can see it being continued. I think we'll see mandatory e-invoicing spread. We'll see more pre-clearance models. This is the clear direction of travel. for tax authorities. And we've already seen the timeline, for new e-invoicing mandates across Europe. Virtually every other tax authority, every individual government and country are currently looking at this. There are various different stages: internal research, public consultations, working behind the scenes to decide on what model to implement. We may see some harmonization. I've mentioned PEPL. PEPL have a new international document model, the PINT. This is being used in Japan. This allows countries to have almost 80% standardization and then topping that up with some local or industry-specific requirements. I think we'll see more of this. I think we'll see the European standard playing a much key role within business-to-business supplies. And also, I think we're going to see, more cross-country collaboration. A great example of this is FactorX. This is a standard that has been developed in France and Germany, so it can be used in both countries. But also, the very cool thing about FactorX, it's a hybrid document. So we've looked at a lot of these requirements at XML. If anyone's ever tried to read an XML, it's very difficult. How are you going to interpret that, read it, prove it, print it, share it? FactorX is a hybrid document, which is human readable as a PDF, but machine readable with embedded XML. So I think, hybrid documents, FactorX, probably the future, and it is one of the acceptable formats in France. And we will continue to see e-reporting be mandated. While it may not be mandatory to raise e-invoices cross-border to customers in other countries or for B2C, that data will likely be required to be submitted via the e-invoicing platform. So how can businesses prepare for all of these e-invoicing mandates? Well, a few overarching principles here on the screen. Awareness, the more advanced knowledge you have, that's key. It gives you more time to prepare, to budget, to find and select your system. Horizon planning, how are you keeping on top of all these mandates? Changes in scope, formats, standards. A lot of these mandates don't stand still. Joining this webinar is a great start. I also recommend signing up for our newsletters and reading our regular blogs. Synergies, there are a lot of differences, but do look for the synergies, similarities between invoicing regimes and requirements. The model, the invoice format doesn't require QR codes, digital signature. That also helps you then focus on the differences. What's the delta? What else do I need to do? And then finally, don't look at this as a local issue. Now is the time to look at this strategically as a single, scalable, global issue, and probably time to invest in a single, scalable, global e-invoicing solution. So think strategically and global, not tactically and local. Implementing e-invoicing, is quite a large project. Do start thinking about your cross-functional team. Who needs to be at the table? Do learn lessons from other implementations. Maybe Italy. Create your roadmap. What are the mandates that are coming up? Which ones do I need to meet? Where are the synergies? Can I bring together, and develop an e-invoicing strategy for my company, for my group? Get IT awareness and their support and buy-in as early as you can. And the same for the C-suite and leadership. They need to be aware of these big changes. They are not optional. If you are unable to meet these requirements, you can no longer really do business in those countries because you have the inability to issue and receive invoices, which, key functions in a business. And I just wanted to end, just by providing a very quick overview of Avalara's e-invoicing solution. So this is a single, scalable, global solution, can convert data from different sources, from your ERP, different platforms, to the required e-invoice format as required in a country, including XML, PDF, hybrid documents, FactorX, and PEPL. Avalara is a approved accredited PEPL provider. We can encrypt invoice data. We can transmit that invoice in the required format to your business partner, your customers, as well as to a tax authority as required. The solution can provide archiving of invoice data. It has a portal and monitor, where you can read your invoices, download them, monitor the progress as they go through the government system. And it's been designed for seamless integration with a number of ways to connect. So it's been designed to meet e-invoicing rules in 60 different countries. That list of countries continues to grow as the mandates grow. And in terms of how that integrating to your system, sending the required data, the Avalara e-invoicing solution converts that, processes it into the required format, can deliver direct to a customer via, in some countries that will go via a government platform, may receive additional data, digital signatures, QR codes, approval numbers. And in some countries like Italy, it will be that platform that sends the invoice direct to your customer. But again, the system's been built for flexibility to meet all of those different e-invoicing models. So thank you. That wraps up the main presentation. I know we're a little short on time now, so I think we've got time for one or two questions. I had a question about Denmark. Someone said, you haven't mentioned Denmark. We read on other blogs, Denmark is mandating e-invoicing from next year, 2023. Is that correct? No, it's not. I know a lot of the headlines on some other blogs and webinars have said Denmark is mandating e-invoicing. I think there's been a bit of confusion, quite a lot of excitement in the market. But in reality, what Denmark is doing, it's passed a digitalization of bookkeeping act, which has basically said that to be a certified ERP accounting software, ERP within Denmark, you need to have the ability to provide e-invoicing functionality for your customers. So these requirements actually relate to the system providers themselves. They need to provide the ability to create, issue, receive an e-invoice. In effect, they need the button, but a business doesn't need to press that button. So e-invoicing, won't be mandatory from next year. Denmark will need to follow, due process. They will need to apply for derogation and give businesses time to prepare. But in the meantime, providers, will start building that functionality. So I hope that, that clears up that point. And any more questions? A question on PEPL. Is PEPL a format? Is it a network? What is PEPL? It's a good question. So PEPL actually means different things to different people. PEPL can refer to the Open PEPL organization that maintains the standards and the network to issue invoices. But PEPL is also a standard. It is a network to issue and receive e-invoices. It's a four-corner model, so you connect via approved PEPL service providers, and they then exchange the e-invoice document in the required format, meeting the European standard to your counterpart, your customers, PEPL service provider. I hope you found this webinar insightful and useful. It's been really fun to present and collaborate with my amazing colleagues from across Europe. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and also thank you to all of the guest speakers. Thank you, Renata.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thanks, Cyril.
Thank you all. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mario.
Grazie a tutti e ciao.
And thank you, Nicole.
Muchas gracias a todos por unirnos a nuestro webinar.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.